Welcome to the Wednesday Witterer. My name is Jorgeshaft, and joining me in the studio today is Dominic.
Dominic Anglim, yes, joined. Surprise guest.
Yeah, surprise guest. I was meant to have someone else on, but they decided they didn't want to talk about our wonderful subjects for today, including crime for the deep dive. We're going to spend a whole hour talking about just like, what is crime? What does it mean? How does it affect you? What are your experiences? Have you done crime? Do you have first-hand experience of crime? We'll catch you all again very, very soon on that. Only on the Wednesday Witcher of Jorgeshaft, hosted by me, Jorgeshaft. It's in the name.
Online, on the iOS and Android, on your mobile phones. Great speakers conversation around the globe. This is Relaks Radio.
It's time for a show on Relaks Radio. It talks about me and you. It's time for a show on Relaks Radio. It talks about me and you. So listen to us, yeah, 24 hours, and let the happiness come to you on Relaks Radio. Tune in to Relaks Radio.
Relaks Radio.
Hello, everyone, and hello, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday Witcher with Jorgeshaft, hosted by me, Jorgeshaft. I said that already. Anyway,
It's in the name.
yeah, welcome to the Wednesday Witcher. I am joined today, of course, with Dominic.
Dominic Anglim, yes, the host of the Art and Spirituality show from the show before.
Yes, some of you might be wondering, like, wait a minute, I've just heard this guy, and the answer is yes, you did. I was meant to have another guest on today. I had this big plan for it's going to be a big discussion, be like very human. There's going to be like all these experiences, and then like while Dominic was on the air, I just get this message going, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I can't come, George." And so it's like, hey Dominic, would you be really, really interested in not leaving the studio?
It won't be human. I will not be human in this interview, but it will be an interview.
Speaking of actually not leaving the studio,
Yeah.
we had a huge thing happen while we were sitting here, which was the man behind everything, the guy who deserves all the credit, Harry. He was like, "Hey, by the way, George, you're going to talk about Trump's coup, right?" And I was like, I've spent like the past, 2 days or so kind of like at home, not really following any news at all. What's happened? And he was like, holy moly, you should look at this.
You need to check this out. Yeah, you need to check this out big time. God, I can't believe it's going on.
I could barely believe it myself. Like, it's one of those things where, well, let's just read it verbatim just to get what it is. So I have CNN up because they're one of the first ones up and one of the most sort of comprehensive articles. Think you agree?
CNN, they always get in there, yep.
Anyway, so the title is Trump Administration Removes Senior Defense Officials and Installs Loyalists, Triggering Alarm at the Pentagon. I'd imagine it would have triggered alarm at the Pentagon. In case anybody somehow missed out, and don't worry, I've got you covered. My 9-hour live special on the American election. You can check out on Relaks Radio.
What's he doing? I can't believe he's going for the coup. I can't believe it.
Yeah, so basically what happened was Trump lost the 2020 general election, even though Republicans actually did quite well nationally in a lot of other seat races. He did not. He lost.
Yeah, and interestingly, they had there was an interview there with the secretary, wasn't it? The Secretary of State, and he was there. They were saying like, "Oh, what are you saying in reference to these like allegations of voter fraud and stuff like this?" And the guy goes, "Yeah, well, we will have a clean transition, a smooth transition into the second Trump administration." Even the fact that he's saying that, the second Trump administration, what the hell does that say?
And this is actually basically the heart of the story. Is by every sort of account, by every way he's acting, Trump just doesn't want to leave.
He does not want to leave. He doesn't understand that it's over. It's time for him to get his coat.
Checking through, I found something about like something he was murmuring about. Oh yeah, the February 2021 budget. Where it's like, wait, but you're not going to be president in February 2021. It'd be Joe Biden.
I know.
What are you doing? Anyway, the story goes on. The Trump administration has carried out sweeping changes atop the Defense Department's civilian leadership structure, removing several of its most senior officials and replacing them with perceived loyalists of the president. The flurry of changes announced by the Defense Department in a statement happened after he fired Defense Secretary Mark Esper and put officials inside the Pentagon on edge and fueled a growing sense of alarm among the military and civilian officials. I'm not surprised yet again.
I'm not surprised either. I can't believe this is actually unfolding. I can't believe this is. This really feels like a movie, doesn't it?
Yeah. So Mark Esper was the guy you referred to earlier, who, when they asked him, he was like, "Oh yeah, no, I'll make sure there's a smooth transition."
Yeah, and I think he really wanted to instill with the global, with the rest of the world, that America is, we have it under control. We're counting
we're
the
all
votes.
good. Yeah,
there's nothing to be alarmed about.
Yeah. There's been a lot of this kind of, and this one actually did catch my attention in the sort of days I was being a hermit.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of kind of controversy and arguing about, did the election, was it fair? Did it go through right?
Yeah.
And all this kind of stuff. Get this. 72% of Republicans apparently don't believe that election was fair, was done right.
72%.
Yeah, of Republicans.
Wow. Well, I think, there's been so many people out there who kind of have been, it's been a real propaganda war, I think, this whole election, hasn't it?
At this point, I've been wondering, like, isn't it going to be like every election just going to be like these propaganda wars?
It is. I mean, it's very theatrical, I think, in the States. Every time there is an election, it's I'm sure it's very good for ratings and for viewings and all that sort of stuff. But, when you get past all of that, like, you have to just go, well, this is actually a country. This is actually people there, and you think about the voter turnout. I mean, I think the difference they're saying anyway, allegedly at the moment, I suppose we have to say, is 74 million for Biden, and I think it was like 69 million for Trump. Is that right?
Those are about the ballpark, yeah.
So that's a big difference. That's like a 5 million difference there. So even, I mean, yeah, I don't know. It seems unlikely. It seems very unlikely there's going to be a different outcome here.
Yeah, this election's been quite different in many ways. There's been the fact that there's been a large number of people postal voting, which is not completely the norm. And there's also been a record turnout. 69% of Americans who could vote apparently did this time around.
Yeah.
And so numbers are up like across the board in every state.
It's not the first time, though, that there have been, irregularities or supposed irregularities with votes in America.
No. Most famously in the last one, the 2016 election was
definitely
mired with allegations that foreign powers had intervened there. And, most notably of the sort of the Mueller investigation into Russia.
Exactly. And even if you cast your mind back to when Al Gore was running for presidency, he was supposed to have won, and then suddenly Mr. Bush got in.
What happened there was actually kind of a similar thing with what happened here, but it was only one state, where basically what happened was Florida was having trouble counting all the votes.
Yeah.
And so they counted the votes one time, but they're like, but it was like 500 votes was the difference.
Yeah.
So we recount just to be sure. And while they were doing that recounting, because the Republicans had won the first time round, they kind of like, oh, no, cancel everything. No, cancel the recount.
Cancel
it's over.
The recount.
We won, totally. And the Supreme Court just gave it to them.
Yeah, and I think, so, I mean, if you look at it historically, I think, that's probably why it did get some backing. That's probably why the recount is happening right now, because of these other irregularities in the past.
It's one of those things as well where it's like, from like a purely impartial point of view, there's this element of like, it happens. Like with the US, they've got like I could have talked about Kennedy, for example. Like it's almost certain that he rigged a couple votes in Chicago and Illinois, like because he had like deep links with the mafia there.
Exactly.
It's like and there's back even as far as It's like after the Civil War, there's a couple. Oh, what was his name? With I want to say Zachary Taylor, but I know that's not who it was. But basically, the guy who ended Reconstruction, there's like, yeah, there was shenanigans going on there.
I feel like, yeah, historically, definitely, when it comes to voting, there's always a little bit of shenanigans going on. There's only what we know about. There's only what they tell us about.
Yeah, and you see, on that level, there's a kind of like a, yeah, I get it, but it really is different when like one of the kind of key players, if you will,
Yeah.
is directly jumping in. Like, no, the president who lost is going in and like, no, it's all fraud. It's all fraud. That
I wonder.
does make a difference.
I wonder, has this happened? I don't think this has happened before, where a president has just basically like called the whole thing a fraud and not been willing to leave the office. I think this might be the first time that this has happened.
As far as I'm aware, this is the first time that it's happened. There's a long history of what they call concession speeches, so
Right.
like where
Yeah.
where sort of all the candidates, they prepare like the big thing, and then when it's over, they kind of stand there and go like, "Oh yeah, well I lost, but joke's on you. Like I was right all along, and you guys are missing out."
Yeah.
But this is the first time really that's not happened.
I'm quite surprised. I have to say, I'm surprised every time I read the news about this. I'm surprised, and I'm surprised. But then at the same time, I'm kind of like, well, it's Trump. Why am I surprised? Like, if anyone was going to try something like this, it would be him.
His willingness to sort of just go against the kind of norms and traditions are
Flout the rules.
legend at this point.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we never thought he'd get in the first time. With the amount of stories, the amount of bad press he was getting, in relation to what he had been getting up to in his private life.
Yeah, he really sort of taught the world the little adage of like, there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Yeah, which was really sad, wasn't it? It was just like, oh God, I can't believe this guy's getting in. So now for him to be like really wiping his feet about leaving, I think, yeah, God, they're gonna have to act pretty fast on that, aren't they?
Yeah, constitutionally, as far as I'm aware, there isn't because he's not been doing a concession speech for a while. So even before my sort of stay at home, not check any news sort of routine,
Yeah,
I had to have seen stuff that basically the sort of consensus is like, yeah, a president doesn't have to do a concession speech. Like,
yeah.
it's like it's one of those things where it's like, you lost the election. If you don't leave, you just get booted. It's like,
Yeah, if you don't do it, it's just assumed that maybe you're just you're kind of not too happy about it, but it's still the law. You're still gonna have to leave. I mean,
and the consensus was kind of like, yeah, if you just stayed in the White House, after the 21st of January, which is the 20th of January to be exact, when it's like when you officially transfer the power. Yes, they have this thing where like they have the election, but then the president kind of stays in for a couple of weeks to sort of like do the transition.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, yeah, if he doesn't leave, then just like he gets escorted out like any other trespasser would be. It's like, God, which would be quite the image.
Yeah, but now it's looking like he's kind of putting some kind of measures in place for that not to happen, which is a little bit alarming.
It is. One of the things that sort of always kind of amused me, if you will, about sort of because you see, there's been a lot of talk of like, oh, the Boogaloo, the Second American Civil War there, and one of the things I always found was like the most kind of funny in that was how the sort of the right, the Republicans there, had this assumption of just like, oh, obviously the military will all side with us, duh.
Yeah.
When that really, really wasn't true. Like famously, like the top brass, the generals, all say they hate working with this guy. He's really unpleasant. He's really inconsistent. He's all annoying. Yeah. But, I'm not laughing now. And it looks like Trump's gotten the message like, oh yeah, a lot of the military people don't like me.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to replace the military people. It's what this whole story is.
But it's not his first time replacing people. Do you remember when he replaced the Department of Justice? When he first got into office, there was someone that basically just went against what he was saying and stuff, and he was just like, okay, and he just replaced her.
Yeah, he's done that multiple times. One of the big ones I can think of was what was his name? His first Secretary of State.
Yeah.
Basically said like, he'd said something like, oh well, this whole Iran deal wasn't actually all that bad. He was just gone the next day. Apparently, he's fired by phone call, which I remember.
Wow.
Like he was literally just on a plane. He just got this phone call. It's like, yep, you're fired. Goodbye.
God, look at that. I mean, that is. I mean, yeah,
the guy after him's been really, really loyal.
he hasn't said a bad word about him.
Yeah. But it's different though when you're doing that after an election, though.
It's very unusual. It feels like a movie. Insofar as like when he got into office, it felt like a movie. And from 2016, it felt like a movie. And now it's just like the sequel. The sequel that no one wanted. No one wanted this to be made.
Well, of course you have to escalate.
Made.
It's like, okay, but the madman's now in charge. No, I won't apologize for calling him a madman. Like the madman's now in charge. What's the sequel?
Yeah. Ooh. How can we escalate this? How can we make this funnier?
Like, okay, he's now going to try a coup. He's going to be, by all accounts, too stupid to actually try and get and pull this off.
Well, I think their initial press conferences, like right after the election results were released, their famous press conference at the Four Seasons.
The Four Seasons, for legal purposes, I must clarify, the Four Seasons Landscaping Company.
Yeah, the Four Seasons Landscaping Company,
in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and I think that was just a stroke of comical genius. However that happened, I'm grateful that it happened because it added a nice lightheartedness to the situation.
It added also a Twitter account, which I'm now following.
Really?
Because basically a bunch of people all decided, hey, I'm the Four Seasons landscaping company. There's one in particular that's kind of like, oh yeah, we just got a request to do a job in the rose garden. It's like, we specialize in doing makeovers of rose gardens. Like famously, that's sort of like the front lawn of the White House is called the Rose Garden.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
It's like, oh yeah, we're really good at those.
Fantastic. Are they getting many followers?
It had a couple followers when I came in, like at least a few thousand, I think.
Wow, that's decent.
Yeah, pretty good for like some guy pretending to be a landscaping company.
Yeah, true. I think it was right after the election results were released and Mr. Trump was tweeting, he's putting on these tweets which were in cap locks,
Of course, a standard
cap lock tweet from himself. And I don't know, there was a bit of desperation. I felt there was definitely a desperation. It was almost kind of like a one last stand.
Yeah.
And now with this supposed coup which is happening, it feels like, it does feel like quite.
This is beyond desperate. Last stand though. Like if you're actively, it's one thing to go like, oh, because like before he was like sending all these lawsuits out.
Yeah.
And like that felt very last stand. It's like, he might want to try and fudge something in the courts.
Sure.
And there's precedent for that happening. 2000, like we talked about.
Yeah.
But, Michigan threw out the case. Wisconsin threw out the case saying there's no evidence. It's like, it just felt like it was just going to be a series of states just going like, what is this?
No,
like,
no. No, take your coat and leave. Take your coat and leave.
If you imagine like in a movie, the scene would be, of course, a lawyer comes in, just dumps like a suit on the judge and is like, read this, like we've got a case, and the judge kind of looking at it and like maybe rifles through page 1 and just goes no and puts it down,
drinks his coffee.
Yeah, he's like, no, next case.
Don't waste my time with these silly notions.
But that's what I thought it was kind of going to end. Was just like, he's just going to try a handful of courts, and the courts will say no.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy that it's happening.
It is, and this is one of those things where, the more you think about it, the more you realize just how significant it is. Because like this isn't just him going, oh yeah, here's some people who need, firing or whatever. It's like, I get that, but this is a case of like, I'm going to fire a bunch of people from the top officers in the security services, and then replace them with my own people after I've lost an election.
I know it seems like the kind of most obvious thing to do for somebody who's looking to kind of like set himself up whereby he's not going to be able to get fired.
It really does. It's disturbing. I think is the the bottom line, don't you think?
I do, but I don't know. We have to believe that it's only going to be seen as something for exactly what it is. No one's going to be like, oh yeah, maybe those top people did need to be replaced. Good thinking. Well done for you for doing that one last good thing before you leave.
That's an incredibly adorable interpretation.
Well, that's that's the kind of the best case scenario for what this could be, because if it's anything else, it just doesn't bear thinking about.
I mean, it almost certainly is, but there's going to be a lot of people who will take that view. It's like, oh yeah, no, they deserve to be fired. Totally.
Well, I mean, I think for sure they probably didn't deserve to be fired, and they'll probably get reinstated. They'll probably get reinstated after he's gone.
You see, this is why I didn't really care that much when last night I was on Discord and somebody mentioned it.
Yeah.
And, it was like 11 o'clock midnight, somewhere like that. I was tired. I was kind of just like, whatever, was my thoughts.
Yeah.
And now of hindsight, thinking about it, it's like I should have kind of connected those dots and go like, wait a minute. It's like,
well, I think it's great. I think it's great in that, like, the American people, the sane American people will not accept this, and they're not going to sit back and just let this thing happen, And it's probably going to empower a lot of people to now start standing up and saying, you know what, this is not okay. This is not something that I want to put my name beside. I've got a lot of American friends, who are just saying like, look, this is our country, this is real life. It's easy to sit somewhere and laugh about this, but at the end of the day, this is a serious situation for them. They're actually living over there,
And it's especially so worrying because, you can say like, oh yeah, no, stand up and do something about it. But there's also a part of me also thinks like, yeah, a lot of people did do that this year and it ended up in riots. And
they did.
A lot of people, people got hurt in those riots.
They did. They did. Yeah, absolutely. But I think, people power change movements where people go out on the street and they protest. Unfortunately, there can be a minority element that will come in and they will start trouble to kind of a little bit deflect away from the original cause. But that's not to say that cause doesn't have a power and doesn't have an energy, and it's very important.
That was my stance as well. Like it was a worthy cause, and so it's like, yeah, I get it. No, it's a good idea to go and protest. But
have you ever gone out and protested something in the street?
I have protested before, yes.
What did you protest?
I've protested a couple things. The most often one, which I've done, I did quite regularly actually last year, was Brexit.
Okay.
I was in various sort of stop Brexit protests.
Okay, interesting.
Very, very anti-Brexit. So.
Were you? Yeah. Did you have your own sign that you made yourself, or were you walking in a group, kind of chanting a chant that somebody was calling out on a loudspeaker?
Weirdly, I didn't really do any of those. What I typically did was I got a big flag, right?
Yeah.
So a big EU flag. So I wore that, and I had like a couple like stickers and so on it.
Yeah.
But mostly I just focused on like being there, being photographed, and like talking to people,
being present.
Yeah. One thing I find myself often doing is when I'm at a protest is finding where the counter protest is and then arguing with someone.
Okay.
And like convincing them, finding some common ground.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, it's very productive. Like I've had a couple of conversations in particular where it's like, it's obviously I've told them something that's new.
Yeah.
And I do live for that.
Well, I think the cool thing about protesting, as you say, you can go over and you can actually talk to somebody from the other side and you can have a conversation with them. And, everything is going to be, it could be resolved through conversation, right?
It could be, but I'm also aware that's something very dependent on like what the nature of the counter protest is. Like there's one protest I remember in particular, which I didn't go to, but where basically like the EDL ended up showing up.
Okay.
And the police luckily were there and kind of like put all the EDL people in a pub, and so they didn't do anything. But it was pretty clear that like violence would have happened if they hadn't been like separated by the cops.
Yeah, I remember going to a protest when I was living in Madrid. I went to a protest which was anti-bullfighting, and it was taking place outside the front of Plaza de Ventas, which is a huge bull ring. It's one of the biggest bull rings in Spain. It's where they have all of the main kind of bull fighting. I use the word fighting in inverted commas because it's really just a slaughter for the bulls, you know.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people there, a lot of industry there, a lot of like small businesses that sell, you know, crisps and sweets and cans of beer and stuff like that right outside of the stadium. And so that's their livelihood, you know.
Yeah.
And we were there. I was there protesting for the bullfighting to end. And then the people that were there, the merchants that were there selling their wares, of course, they were protesting. They didn't want us there because at the end of the day, we're standing in front of their livelihood, right?
Yeah. It's like a direct attack on like their income.
Exactly. So that did get quite heated, and that was quite dangerous in places. But I don't know. I think it is important to go out and protest, and you know,
and definitely the dangers of protests I've usually find are nowhere near as dangerous as the dangers of an illegitimate, dangerous leader.
Definitely. Do you get involved in online petitions, George?
I do actually get involved with online petitions.
What kind of online petition things do you follow? And do you participate in?
I don't follow any particular one.
It's just if it's a subject that you like, you'll kind of sign it kind of thing.
I think all of the first ones I can think of are actually more like joke ones.
Okay.
I've signed like a couple of sort of jokes, but apart from that, most of the time, it's like the one kind of petition which, whenever I see it, I definitely will always sign is one urging in some form or another for electoral reform.
Okay.
In Britain.
Yeah.
Like that's like my, if I could be a single issue voter, that'd be my single issue. Is like,
yeah, nice.
If you're not in favor of like that basic sort of reform of the country, no, it links in to make the leaders more legitimate, to make the process be more accountable, more responsive and reflective of like what the people want.
Yeah.
On that sort of very basic level.
Yeah.
It's like, as far as I'm concerned, often it's like the rest of it kind of flows from there.
Definitely.
In our current system, if you have an election where two politicians say they want to deal with the environment and one says no, the math favors the guy who says no. It's like that's not good. That's obviously against what most people want.
Yeah,
that has real world consequences.
Absolutely. And I think that's why, what happened in America earlier this year when we had the huge, massive outcry for the Black Lives Matter movement. I think that's why it was so powerful, because it was so many people just kind of going, you know what, I believe in democracy. I've had my vote. I've had my say with my ballot, and it hasn't made a difference. So now I'm going to go out in the street and I'm gonna make my voice count. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to be present.
Make some noise.
Make some noise, exactly. And I'm sure that the American people will not sit back quietly and let this happen. This new thing that's happening right now.
I hope they don't, because ultimately, even though I'm kind of worried about the damage that the riots will do.
Yeah.
Because like empathy, but ultimately at the end of the day, I do think it would be worse if they didn't, because it would just be letting a megalomaniac just get away with a power grab.
Well, do you remember when he was going for presidency in the first place? And there was huge turnouts from. There was a lot of women protesting and saying, "Look, you're not." And even after he got in, they were like, "You're not my president. You're not my president." You know?
It's definitely a case of like you're making noise to get your point across.
Yeah, definitely. And I think look at Greta. Greta
Thunberg.
Yeah. When she started protesting, she was just one person. And then she started getting other people to protest, and that of course attracted press. And with press, you can get publicity and you can kind of shed a light on things. And I think that's what I'm really happy about, is that we're actually hearing about this. We're hearing about the things that he's doing. There is press reporting on this, because the real danger is when it's not getting reported upon and you're not hearing anything about it, and you don't even know it's taking place.
Well, it's one of those things where they say that the only thing that's needed for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing.
Exactly.
But good people can't do anything if they don't know.
Exactly.
That's why there's another sort of little adage, which is like, if you want to do something really evil, hide it in something really boring, so nobody pays attention to it.
Yeah. That's a good point.
There's there's quite a few, and especially in America, they've got a long tradition of like, oh, let's try and do something like really evil, but hide in like the most boring, like admin work we possibly could.
Right.
The big one I can think of where that happened, and it got attention though, but by fluke, was when the Trump administration repealed net neutrality.
Ah, yes.
Normally kind of like a really technical thing, and like, but like people care, like it's something that matters.
Yeah, big time.
And they tried to hide in like a really technical, minor little thing. It's like, oh, don't worry, it's just like an administrative thing. It's like, wait,
Yeah.
no, it's
No,
not.
Hang on a second.
It's like-
What's that? What's the
like-
small print?
It's like that's not okay. We didn't sign up for this.
Yeah,
It still went through, but
it
like
still went through. They
the fact that somebody caught it,
put
and
through-
there was a protest and people cared,
yeah.
delayed it for a bit.
That's the thing. I mean, these things will only be important as long as people actually care about them. So I think it's really important for for countries in Europe and and of course for Britain as well, and to speak up about what's happening and say that we're not okay with what's happening.
That's
in the States.
Yeah, that's actually something that is a cause for concern. On Monday, was it Dominic Raab, if I remember correctly, was asked actually like, oh, do you believe that every vote in an election should be counted? And his response was waffle. Journalist go, excuse me, this is a yes or no question. Do you believe every vote should be counted? Oh, well, you see, waffle.
Typical politician, huh?
Typical politician, but that's one of those questions where it's like, waffle is bad. No, the only right answer is to say yes, they should all be counted. Duh. Like,
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
only right answer.
The clear answer should be given. Like,
Yeah, and if you've got that kind of response, it's like, oh, you don't believe that, do you? Is that
Yeah.
what you're saying?
exactly. Well, I think the fact that he's waffling probably answered it in itself.
Well, the truth of that was pretty obvious. Like, he just didn't want to offend Trump.
Right.
And so it's like,
Yeah.
oh well, what? But if like Trump doesn't want to be angry, then like what are we gonna do if I just like sit there and like, what if I just stand here and just keep talking and just keep nonsense?
Yeah.
It's like, no, stop it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, they never want to say exactly what you want to hear, do they?
No, it's another one of those techniques. You say something really evil, but you hide it in something really boring because you've just waffled on for 5 minutes before you actually got to that point.
Yeah.
And by then, the journalist is asleep, the listeners have tuned out,
Switched off.
the last orders is flashing on the pub. It's like, yeah, but you've just gone away with something evil.
Exactly. So important. That's why it's so important to have clear messages out there.
It is. It's also, one of the things that kind of makes me worry about like the way America's going though, because you've got this sort of like a class of people who are obviously prepared to just kind of waffle away and try and hide misdeeds or just commit them blatantly in the open.
Yeah.
But then you've got so many people who just support it. Like the kind of point that's really been bothering me is like, after these years and years and years of chaos and just instability, damage to the policy, ripping up like all the environmental legislation, for example.
Yeah.
That then tens of millions of people went, yeah, I like that. This is fine. 4 more years.
I know. But I don't know. I feel like it's all about how these things are packaged, and how they're framed. And I'm sure, I'm sure a lot of people that did vote for Trump, they were probably, voting for him because maybe they had a job or something like that. Maybe they had a job in America, and before that they didn't have a job. So they're very much, only seeing things very black and white. Now, politics is a very crafty marketing trick that they use. There's a lot of subliminal messages in there. There's a lot of NLP, neuro linguistic programming that goes on
completely.
And I'm sure for those people, if they did have a much clearer picture of what they were voting for, and they had the whole picture, then maybe they would have voted differently.
Problem is though, it's like tens of millions of people voted for it, and I have no doubt in my mind that tens of millions will support these paragraphs.
Potentially.
That's
It's all possible.
that's the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night.
It can go either way, though, George, as well. You know, it really can go either way, and it's all about educating people and giving people the full picture on things, and that's why it's so important. It's fantastic that this news story is getting out there and that people are talking about it.
People clearly outraged by it. Yeah,
People are clearly outraged by it, and of course they should be.
Yeah, it's like you'd be worried if they weren't.
Exactly, and I think in America, I'm sure there's a lot of grassroots movements which are taking place to kind of counter this sort of stuff. There is. I mean, this even though there were all those millions of people that voted for him, at the same time there was more people that didn't vote for him. So that suggests that there's a movement towards something else. And I think it's possible that it can definitely change. The tides can change.
Yeah,
maybe the tides already have changed, and this is just their last
stand
ditch attempt
before
paragraph.
the tide washes away and creates a nice clean beach again.
Yes.
Anyway,
I like that analogy.
You're listening to the Wednesday Witterer with George Shaft, hosted by George Shaft. Joining me today in the studio is Dominic. If you want to contact the studio, if you want to say something, you can absolutely do so. We are streaming at least on Facebook, probably like everywhere, which is very nice. And we also have a phone. And with this phone, you have the special ability to call us. The number, of course, to call us is 07852 473 and 473. But I wouldn't recommend doing so right now because I think some other people deserve a chance to talk, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Let's let the other people have a chat. And we'll catch you all again very, very soon.
Whoa, Relax Radio.
আপনি হয়তোবা জানেন না যে রেডিও অ্যাডভার্টাইজমেন্ট is 4 times more powerful than any other media. রিল্যাক্স রেডিওতে যদি অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করতে চান তাহলে আমাদেরকে আজই যোগাযোগ করুন on 020-7474-9292. আমাদের সাথে অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করুন from £99 a month. Increase your business by advertising on Relax Radio.
It's time for a show on Relax Radio. It talks about me and you. It's time for a show on Relax Radio. It talks about me and you. So listen to us, 24 hours, and let the happiness come to you on Relax Radio. Tune in to Relax Radio.
It has been too long. No one has taken the initiative to know who you are and what you do. Well, Relax proudly presents Relax Media to unite and expose all media-related personalities under one umbrella. If you are an artist or maybe you're looking for one, look no further. Log on to www.relaksmedia.com, RELAKS media.com. In return, you get a free webpage and exposure to wider fan appreciation and contacts. Also, optional personal manager. Don't delay.
Relax Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Wednesday Witterer of George Shaft, hosted by me, George Shaft, as it's like in the name, you kind of expect it. You are listening, of course, to the Wednesday Witterer. I am just at this particular moment getting the Facebook live stream up, just in case there are any comments here, which there are. By seeing Mahi says, Arnab Goswami is in jail, yay. And I am super happy. Well, I'm glad that you're super happy, mate. That's a very, very, feeling that I definitely endorse. Yes, put that on the pin of controversial opinions by George is, of course, the idea that, hey, I like it when people are happy. But when people are happy, there's something that causes that. There's like circumstances that make people be happy, and there are things that don't. And one of the things that universally is considered to definitely not make people happy, again, the jorgeshaft school of saying extremely controversial things is that crime makes people very unhappy. And that's going to be the deep dive today. Today, I'm going to be talking about crime, experiences, history, circumstances, all that good stuff. Everything you could ever possibly never, ever want to know about crime. So, what exactly does that mean, though? What exactly is crime, and how do we know what is it defined by? Now, if I'd had a guest, my plan was to just go into talk about, experiences and stories, because I think that ultimately every one of us has at least, if we've been on Earth for any significant amount of time, has at least some brush up with crime. I can think of actually one story or one time that happened to me when I was walking to work. This happened last year, and I was walking on the road, and suddenly there was a police cordon, and there was just like a police officer there, just going like, "Yeah, find another way." So I had to walk around and find some long, complicated, series of routes to go down. In the end, it turned out what had happened was that there had been a stabbing there, a clear crime, a clear common law crime. Which, little teaser for later. A clear crime, police involved, all of that stuff. But, what does that mean? And what does it mean for you? Have you ever sort of had a brush up with crime? Has any criminal activity happened to you? Have you maybe committed one? Hopefully you served your sentence if that was the case. Whichever the case, you should absolutely message, or you should call on the studio phone. The studio phone is 07852 473 and 473. But what exactly do I mean when I'm talking about crime? What exactly is happening? What is the sort of the actual act? Well, to get us started, I've got the free dictionary up, and the free dictionary has a wonderful little part that does actually have the word crime in it and defines what it means. A crime is, quote, an act committed in violation of law, where the consequences of conviction by a court is punishment, especially where the punishment is a serious one, such as imprisonment. All right. The second one, it gives its unlawful activity. Makes sense, I suppose. It works with the first one. The third one is a serious offense, especially one that is in violation of morality, which now we're starting to introduce some aspects that are kind of harder to pin down now, aren't we? The fourth one is an unjust, senseless, or disgraceful act or condition, which, that's something different entirely. That's the kind of the example given is it's a crime to waste all that paper, which when, of course, it is not actually a crime to do so. But leaving that fourth definition aside, leaving aside the sort of colloquial jokes about, how much of a crime it is that my Discord is a great place, all that sort of stuff. It's something that sort of bears in mind, though. What do we mean when we talk about crime? What do we mean when we talk about criminal activity? One crime that hit my mind as a kind of a strange one is one that is defined in Scottish law as reset. Reset is one that is intuitively, it's one of those things where you intuitively think like, yeah, it's a crime. Reset is defined in crime.scot is the dishonest possession of goods obtained by another by way of theft, robbery, fraud, or embezzlement, in the knowledge that they were obtained in that way. Reset is also being privy to the retention of dishonestly obtained property. So, for example, a little story with Reset that's pretty funny is that it's actually completely illegal to own a 1933 gold dollar coin. Well, why would that be the case? Well, what happened was that in 1933, the American president at the time, FDR, Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he's having some money problems. There's difficulty in the economy, and he went, okay. I know how I'm going to fix this. I'm going to make sure that the state keeps all of its gold. Have a bigger gold reserve for the year, and part of that will involve, getting rid of all of the gold coins we've minted this year. But that's fine. We can just go and take them and melt them. Well, there's one small problem with that, of course, which is crime. The secret ingredient, the thing that really makes it work, crime. Someone at the Federal Reserve, when they went to melt down, or at the mint, not the reserve, it's the mint, when they went to melt down all of these coins, took some, stole them away, whisked them off to some magic happy land where now it is officially a crime to actually own a United States 1933 gold dollar coin. The reason why, of course, is that the coins shouldn't exist. FDR ordered them all to be melted. And the only way, and because they hadn't been issued to the public yet, the only way that coin could exist is if someone had stolen it. Therefore, owning one is Reset. Now, this is one that it is something that's interesting, because would you consider owning such a coin to be a crime? No, if you're owning some coin that, it should have been melted in 1933, but then, it's been ages and ages since then. Who cares, right? Well, we'll get into that later, the sort of definitions of crime across culture and the differences that makes. But for now, the thing I want to talk about is, the kind of basic assumptions that we have of what are the most simple, obvious crimes we have out there. These, not only do they change, though, they get kind of a new life, and we get the kind of a new different sort of idea around them. One example is back to the 1933 coins. Someone stole the coin, who was working in the mint, and somehow the king of Egypt ended up getting a copy. He found one of these 1933 golden coins in 1956, but he had a problem. Owning this coin is illegal. But since he was the king of Egypt, wouldn't have been illegal for him to have it in Egypt. So he just kind of, rang up the US government. He called them up, said, hey, by the way, I would really like to import into Egypt this particular coin. Would you like me to sort of fill in the application form and get the official export duties for that? Government said yes. The export paperwork was filled out, and suddenly, King of Egypt's golden $1 coin from 1933 was mysteriously not a crime anymore. Even though, by all accounts, it should still be reset. It was still go back to the crime.scots definition. It's the sort of main official website describing crime in Scotland. Is that it is the dishonest possession of goods obtained by another by way of theft, robbery, or fraud, or embezzlement, which is obviously the case if you own a 1933 gold dollar coin. Now, you could only have gotten that by knowing, someone stole this, and now I have it. It's interesting. It's interesting how our kind of ideas around the sort of morality, around the kind of the legalese for these various different crimes, it shifts, it changes. And even, some of the most basic and the most, what you'd think would be clear-cut cases of a crime and what it actually constitutes falls apart surprisingly quickly when you look at human history and when you look at human cultures. But before I get into that, because that's going to be the next segment, I do want to sort of bring up one little personal story that I had first. Now, the reason why I'm actually bringing this up at all, and why I'm also selecting Reset in particular, because you see, it was Monday. I wanted to go out to the Relaks Radio studio because I wanted to sort of do some work for the station, right? So I get ready, I wash up, get all prepared, and I open my door, and my door hit something. Bit unusual. I don't usually keep things outside my door. When I swung it fully open and had a look, it turned out that, yeah, I don't keep something. Somebody else did, as there was a purse right in front of my door at my apartment. Now, as you might, it's no prize for suggesting that, yeah, that's unusual. I'm not the kind of person who keeps purses right in front of my door. And so I had a look and I investigated and quickly found, rifling through it, that, yeah, no, I'm not. And also, I don't think the person who kept this purse, who actually owned this purse, was the kind of person who'd do so either. The purse, contained membership cards, it had coins, it had lighters, pens. All of this it seemed, owned by someone whose those cards mentioned by name. Yeah, this was definitely, I could only conclude, there as a result of crime. Someone had to have stolen, this poor individual's purse. I'm not going to name what the name was because, well, obviously that would be improper. But, someone clearly either just stole the purse or, in some horrible nightmare scenario, maybe just like attacked or robbed this person, mugged them, and stole their stuff. And then, I guess, probably just rifled through it and stole, like the little coin purses. There was nothing like, those wallet. There's nothing like a wallet. There's no mobile phone, which is in many people keeping their purses. There was no, like my mom keeps like prescription bags of like with like all the medicines inside, which I had reason to suspect this person probably would be the kind who would have, but there was none of that. And it seemed pretty clear. It's like, yeah, the reason it's not in the purse is because whoever stole this purse committed the crime, also then added to the crime by taking these items as well. Very, very interesting indeed. Very, very curious. And by curious, I mean, oh my God, that's a crime. Somebody do something about it. But now, with this knowledge, of course, technically, if I just decided to just ignore the purse, that would actually probably make me a criminal too. Because it would have been a case of like, yeah, it's like, here's something which at that point I would know, yeah, this was probably, stolen. This is a victim, belongs to some victim who is no doubt dearly missing this item. And yet, I'd have it like in my possession when I didn't want it. So of course I did the only right thing to do, which was to call the cops. And after a long process that took like about an hour, half an hour, something like that, it ended up with me dropping off this thing in the London British Transport Police office in St Pancras International Station. The cops there called up some phone numbers that were written inside the purse and confirmed that the numbers belonged to people who knew the victim, and so hopefully it's all resolved. But there are many cases where, especially throughout history, there are many circumstances where, even though this would clearly be a crime, it was clearly the result of a crime, and legally in Britain today, keeping it would have been a crime, historically actually really wouldn't have been. Let's talk about that after these other people have a chat. So I'll catch you all again very, very soon.
Whoa, Relax Radio.
আপনি হয়তোবা জানেন না যে রেডিও অ্যাডভার্টাইজমেন্ট ইজ 4 times more powerful than any other media. রিল্যাক্স রেডিওতে যদি অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করতে চান তাহলে আমাদেরকে আজই যোগাযোগ করুন on 020-7474-9292. আমাদের সাথে অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করুন from £99 a month. Increase your business by advertising on Relax Radio.
It's time for a show on Relax Radio. It talks about me and you. It's time for a show on Relax Radio. It talks about me and you. So listen to us, 24 hours, and let the happiness come to you on Relax Radio. Tune in to Relax Radio.
It has been too long. No one has taken the initiative to know who you are and what you do. Well, Relax proudly presents Relax Media to unite and expose all media-related personalities under one umbrella. If you are an artist, or maybe you're looking for one, look no further. Log on to www.relaxmedia.com, RELAKS media.com. In return, you get a free webpage and exposure to wider fan appreciation and contacts. Also, optional personal manager. Don't delay.
Relax Radio.
In the deep, dark, ancient times, before there really was writing at all, well, we have proof that humans were familiar with the concept of crime. They were familiar with the concept that, hey, people doing things that, are bad should not be allowed to get away with doing bad things. In fact, so much so that some of the very oldest written texts ever discovered actually cover crime. Well, hello, welcome to the Wednesday Witterer. My name is jorgeshaft. Joining me in the studio today is my computer and the knowledge that, crime is the subject for the deep dive. We have already discussed and established several things already. We've established that crime is defined by multiple definitions. More on that later. We've also discovered that crime is something that's both specific, but yet also evolving at the same time. The fact that someone, who, for all intents and purposes, is doing the same thing, can, however, be considered a crime or not a crime, depending on, extraneous activities. Like how I mentioned on Monday, I had this purse, and so by me having it was technically a crime, but because I immediately called the cops and said, hey, there's this missing item here, I think it was stolen, suddenly not a crime anymore and being a responsible citizen. But that becomes way, way complicated by the fact that, of course, the idea of crime shifts and it's changed many times over time. Let's start with the oldest of all, The Code of Hammurabi, says Wikipedia, is a well-preserved Babylonian code of law from ancient Mesopotamia, which is dated to about 1750 BC. It is one of the oldest deciphered writings of any significant length anywhere in the world. And, as the name suggests, that writing is a law code. In fact, actually, it shows that I'm just checking. It is almost so. It's actually not that. It just shows that like one of the oldest texts ever written is all about law. In fact, actually, we can go even back further than that. Just as a brief aside, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was dated to about 2100 BC. This is a legend that talks about, the adventures of Gilgamesh and all of his life and doings. Even that recognizes the idea of, this is a crime. We should do something about it because he does, activities which are brought before, courts, if you will. He gets the official. His first job in the epic is to be a watchman. So clearly, there's the idea that, hey, gotta watch out for those dodgy people. We don't want them to be, to have anything done to, do anything to us. The Code of Hammurabi, however, from 1750 BC, is very, very interesting because, as I mentioned, it's one of the oldest law codes ever. In fact, the oldest. And it's surprisingly advanced in some areas. For example, the third law in the code is, quote, or translated rather, if a man has borne false witness in a trial or has not established the statement that he has made, if that case be a capital trial, that man shall be put to death. It's very interesting how, there's a surprisingly modern, if you will, interpretations. Like, we still have that crime. We call it perjury now, where, if you go to a court and you lie under oath, you are in big trouble. So, because you're not supposed to do that. Obviously. There are various other sort of crimes on here that are all very, very modern, really. Fraud is considered a crime under Hammurabi. The theft is also a crime. Murder is clearly also a crime that's covered in the Hammurabi Code. But it is very clear when you look at it also that there are differences in opinion on how it should be dealt. It's very different, almost alien actually, of what kind of punishments are doled out as well. Let's start with those different crimes as well. Slander, for example, is a crime covered in the Hammurabi Code. It is quoted as, or translated, if anyone points the finger at a sister of a god, or the wife of anyone, and cannot prove it, this man shall be taken before the judges, and his brow shall be marked by cutting the skin, or perhaps the hair. Yikes! Don't slander people. Don't point fingers at people and go like, they're bad or whatever. Because otherwise you're gonna get your skin marked. Nowadays we consider slander almost like a civil offense. It just goes to the courts and you argue it out. Theft is another. The punishments also are very, very uncomfortable to the modern reader as well. I think that only the sort of harshest and most barbaric people in modern times would agree with the code of, quote, if anyone is committing a robbery and is caught, then he shall be put to death. Here in Britain, people caught for robbery serve time in prison. In fact, prison isn't even an idea at all in the Hammurabi Code. Punishments tend to fall into three categories in the code. One of them is, as we established, death. Another is, as we've established also, forms of mutilation. You can lose bits of body bits. In fact, the Hammurabi Code famously includes this verse, quote, "If a man destroy the eye of another man, they shall destroy his eye. If one break a man's bone, they shall break his bone. If one destroy the eye of a freeman, or break the bone of a freeman, he shall pay 1 gold mina. If one destroy the eye of a man's slave, or break a bone of a man's slave, he shall pay 1/2 his price." But, well, there's a little catch as well. There's the eye for an eye, bone for a bone. The famously quoted, paraphrased by Gandhi when he went eye for an eye and the whole world goes blind. Well, here we are, Hammurabi, 1500 BC. He's showing, the official law is literally written, eye for an eye. You destroy the eye of another man, we'll destroy yours. But there's the third punishment as well, in that exact same verse that Hammurabi has. There's the idea of fines. An idea that's still around, but, well, you can also see just how alien and strange and, different the idea of just society and what consists of a crime was. Different people from various different social classes, people from different sort of stratas of society, carried different punishments, for them. If a man, as it said, if a man if you broke the eye or bone of a free man, you had to pay, a gold amount of money. But if you're doing it to a slave, you didn't have to do it anywhere near as much. By the way, doing things to the nobility, which is also a class put in there, generally carried the death penalty, no matter what your crime actually was. And the nobility, meanwhile, they just had to pay fines for just about any crime, including murdering freemen, which, again, really does show both the fact that, back in Hammurabi's day, they had a very, very different interpretation of what a crime was, or what it meant, but then also the fact that most of these crimes that are listed in the code are surprisingly similar. As I mentioned before, fraud, theft, robbery, perjury, murder, are all physical assault, are all considered crimes in the Hammurabi Code, the oldest law code ever written, 1700 BC, and people were already like, perjury's wrong. We shouldn't do that. But, hey, that sort of stuff kept changing. The idea of what is a crime and who does it is something that wouldn't stay static at Hammurabi. In ancient Rome, it's the 1st century, and Marcus Licinius Crassus is in a lot of trouble. He's in a lot of trouble because he's accused of having intimate relations with a so-called Licinia. Doesn't sound, like that much of a problem, surely. I mean, apart from the fact that in the Hammurabi Code, adultery was actually officially listed as a crime, and it was, quote, if the wife of a man has been caught lying with another man, they shall bind them and throw them into the waters. If the owner of the wife should save his wife, then in turn the king should save his servant. Which, kind of hair-raising there. But anyway, even apart from the fact that adultery was widely considered to be a crime in much of the ancient world, basically all of the major religions all say that adultery is a terrible crime. Marcus Licinius Crassus in the 1st century, though, BC, was in extra hot water, though, because Licinia was a Vestal virgin. Vestal virgins were priestesses, selected from a very, very young age, and they were basically given a bit of a bargain. You would be a powerful, priestess, you were allowed and afforded lots of rights that women in Roman times were generally not allowed to have, like owning property, for example. But there's one sort of condition. Quote from the National Geographic: a Vestal virgin had to abstain from sex, sacred obligation to one of Rome's most ancient customs that would continue until Christianity ended the cult in AD 394. It was a crime for a Vestal virgin, a priestess, one of these priestesses, to have intimate relations with anybody. And being found guilty of having those kinds of relationships for a Vestal virgin was the death penalty. I actually remember watching a video on what that death penalty was. It's pretty gruesome. Basically, what they do is they put someone in to they put the offender into like a little room, and then they just kind of brick up the ceiling, except for like a couple little holes. And the offending Vestal virgin would die of thirst. Yeah, fun times. Nowadays, we wouldn't even consider that to be a crime. It's like, oh, you were a priestess of a cult which said priestesses shouldn't have sex, but then you did have intimate relationships. Oh well, we wouldn't consider that a crime in the modern world, in the vast majority of countries. But yet, in ancient Rome, that carried the death penalty. In ancient Hammurabi's time, adultery carried the death penalty. And that was alongside all of these other things that Hammurabi had with the death penalty, like fraud and theft and physical assault. But note also, again, how in many ways also unchanging these laws were. Hammurabi and the Romans all agreed that assault was a crime, that theft was a crime, robbery, murder, assault. All these things were crimes. They were obviously considered to be, bad, and don't do them. But what does that say? What does that mean that that there are some activities, there are some acts that just seem so obviously they're a crime. And what does that say about our modern interpretations of how to go about dealing with crime and making sure that crime doesn't happen anymore? Well, luckily, I could tell you all about it after these other people have a chat. I'll catch you all again very, very soon.
Whoa, Relax Radio.
আপনি হয়তোবা জানেন না যে রেডিও অ্যাডভার্টাইজমেন্ট ইজ 4 times more powerful than any other media. রিল্যাক্স রেডিওতে যদি অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করতে চান তাহলে আমাদেরকে আজই যোগাযোগ করুন on 020-7474-9292. আমাদের সাথে অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করুন from £99 a month. Increase your business by advertising on Relax Radio.
It's time for a show on Relax Radio. It talks about me and you. It's time for a show on Relax Radio. It talks about me and you. So listen to us, 24 hours, and let the happiness come to you on Relax Radio. Tune in to Relax Radio.
It has been too long. No one has taken the initiative to know who you are and what you do. Well, Relax proudly presents Relax Media to unite and expose all media-related personalities under one umbrella. If you are an artist, or maybe you're looking for one, look no further. Log on to www.relaksmedia.com, RELAKS media.com. In return, you get a free webpage and exposure to wider fan appreciation and contacts. Also, optional personal manager. Don't delay.
Relax
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Wednesday Witterer of jorgeshaft, hosted by me, jorgeshaft, as I do my deep dive on crime. What does it mean? Now, how does it affect us? What are its interpretations? We've covered a bunch of stuff when it comes to crime already. I talked about a recent experience I've had with crime, where a mystery bag presented itself in front of my door, which I fairly quickly established was probably stolen, and had to deal with that situation. I talked about the fact that throughout history, the interpretations of what a crime even is and how to deal with it varied considerably. How the Code of Hammurabi defined adultery as a crime, whereas in modern Britain it is not considered a crime, and how a huge range of offences carries the death penalty, such as theft, when we don't do the death penalty anymore. Including if you're a Vestal Virgin in ancient Rome, having intimate relations carried the death penalty for the Vestal Virgin. And also for her lover, by the way, which is a big yikes as well. So very, 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 very curious and very scary. But it's time for us to take another step back and ask the question of, okay, so we have examples of crimes, we have experiences of crimes, and we even had the definition of crime as well earlier, but what exactly, let's try and categorize this, shall we? Because there's loads of acts that are being put out there, loads of ideas, but let's try and organize them. Well, in a lot of legal systems, there actually is some pretty good sort of things just to define them. I'll go with the British sort of example because, well, Britain is the country I'm living in. We actually have got multiple different sort of types of crimes. The most notable and most important for our discussion today is the difference between what they call a common law offence and a statutory offence. I've got the Scott's crime.scot. Again, it's the work in progress guide to Scottish criminal law, and it defines a common law as this, quote, the way I tend to summarize common law offences are that they are, quote, crimes that are crimes because they just are. Common law crimes include, though not completely the list, is assault, theft, murder, fraud, and breach of the peace. So they were not created by Parliament, and they are not defined by legislation. These are acts which there's no law that specifically says, oh, you can't commit a breach of the peace. Oh, you can't murder, you can't do fraud. But yet, you can't do those things in Britain. They are illegal. If they'll go out there and you commit theft or commit assault, you will be punished. You'll face prison time, fines, the whole shebang. Even though there's no specific law that says, no, don't do those things. In 1797, Baron David Hume used his research into High Court decisions to produce an authoritative account of the state of Scottish criminal law at that time. As such, we suddenly had an explanation of all these crimes known in Scotland. In Hume's commentaries, updated posthumously in 1844 and since, is regarded the sort of authoritative text. In it, they define offences, rules, and of evidence and procedure that have developed over the course of hundreds of years, and is thus a constantly evolving process. The development tends to come from the decisions of the high courts, the judiciary, but they can also come from the sort of UK Supreme Court. The constant evolution of common law means that staying on top of the sort of law case developments as much as possible is extremely important for criminal lawyers. It's also why there's not exactly that much of a second-hand market for law textbooks when it comes to criminal law, because they often become out of date. But again, what is exactly going on here? Why do we have this idea of the common law? Well, the simple thing is the core difference. This is generally true, but like the core big difference between common law, which is what we have in Britain, and civil law, which is the wide range of different law codes that is practiced in most of the rest of the world, is the idea of how much power we give to judges. Basically, to summarize, in Britain, we allow judges to kind of decide and just make laws in their rulings. Whereas certainly in continental Europe, judges don't have that power. Their power strictly, no, this is what the law says, and I'm going to enact that and make it reality. If there's a change that has to be done, let the politicians do it. But one of the things that comes with that territory, of course, is the fact that in Britain, and also in everywhere else that does common law, that comes with that a tradition of like, yeah, but judges have always ruled certain things to just always be crimes. Yeah. Don't steal stuff. That's bad. We don't like it when people steal stuff. Don't do that. That's a crime. It just is. Whereas in civil law cases, though, doing that would actually technically be called a statutory offence. Reading from the same source for now, crime.scot, the statutory offence is, quote, if an offence is created by the state or by, say, a piece of legislation, then it's a statutory offence. Confusingly, these can also be called enactments, which is when Parliament enacts a law. There are many sort of examples of sort of statutory offences, and multiple definitions as well. The freedictionary.com adds a few little extra layers to that, which is, quote, crimes which are created by statutes and not by common law. Specifically, they are an act which is punishable by law, usually considered to be an evil act that is recorded as part of the law. What examples would that be? Well, for example, the example that Scots.com uses to really sort of bring that sort of example forward is the idea of, quote, using threatening or abusive language, which in the specific case of Scotland was a law that was created in 2010 by the Criminal Justice and Licensing Act, in Scotland. This is true of great many offences. You might have heard, for example, of the idea of statutory rape, which is basically the idea of like, yeah, Parliament, or in that case, usually is talked about in the American context, but where it would have been Congress, kind of stepped in and went, hey, we need an example. No, we need to sort of establish a definition, an idea of a clear guideline on what the sort of these sexual crimes mean. What is their definition? How do we know which is a crime and which isn't? And so there are many acts that are sort of put in there, which in the common law sense, in the sense of like the traditions of many years of ages, I don't think I really need to sort of go into why in days of ancient eras, gender equality was not the best. Go back again to what I was saying. Adultery was a crime that just about everywhere in the ancient world. The Parliament decided, well, the sort of like the tradition from all these hundreds of years ago on like what exactly is a crime in sort of these sexual assault cases isn't really clear. It's not good enough. So we're going to write down a definition, a more updated version to go like, hey, no, this is what we mean when we talk about this specific crime. And then also we have the case, for here in particular, a Scottish law that's like, yeah, what is threatening and abusive behavior? Hammurabi's code, for example, talked about the fact that, you couldn't slander people and you couldn't defraud them. But where was the crime in saying, so going for ancient, for Hammurabi's times, if somebody had gone out in the streets and gone like, oh, those the ancient Sumerians are terrible people and we should kill them all. It's like, that officially wasn't a crime. It's like there was no rule saying, you couldn't incite hatred of versus a minority group. Since then, things have kind of changed since we kind of realized that, inciting pogroms and mass genocides of minority groups is not a good thing. People die in those, and that would be murder. We should do something about it, and we shouldn't just let it boil over. So we have laws now, statutory laws written by parliaments, by national governments that say, hey, don't say offensive things. Don't, go out there with all kinds of encouraging behavior, being abusive, having, spouting, nonsense hatred against vulnerable groups who can't defend themselves and thus, put their lives at risk. It's really interesting, isn't it? That how over time, as society develops, as in many ways we evolve, we add on ideas to the ideas this is how we do things. A judge in Hammurabi's day would have a pretty easy case, really. The Hammurabi Code is a pretty short booklet. I've read it. It's, I read it in an afternoon. And, if you were a lawyer at that time, you're haggling over just a handful of passages. I don't think anybody in Britain could memorize all of Britain's laws, not with even just the criminal law. There's just so much. There's such a huge body of work. And then when you add in the regulations, you add in the statutory additions, you add in all the amendments, all this stuff. We add more and more and more crimes, but we also add at the same time a clearer and a more firm understanding of this in particular is a crime, and the reason why it is a crime is because of X. But of course, just because Britain does it in that way doesn't necessarily mean that the rest of the world does. And indeed, you'd be completely correct in that, as you'll find out just after these other people have a chat. Catch you all again very, very soon.
Whoa, Relaks Radio.
আপনি হয়তোবা জানেন না যে রেডিও অ্যাডভার্টাইজমেন্ট ইজ 4 times more powerful than any other media. রিল্যাক্স রেডিওতে যদি অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করতে চান তাহলে আমাদেরকে আজই যোগাযোগ করুন on 020-7474-9292. আমাদের সাথে অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করুন from £99 a month. Increase your business by advertising on Relax Radio.
It's time for a show on Relax Radio. It talks about me and you. It's time for a show on Relax Radio. It talks about me and you. So listen to us, 24 hours. And let the happiness come to you on Relax Radio. Tune in to Relax Radio.
It has been too long. No one has taken the initiative to know who you are and what you do. Well, Relax proudly presents Relax Media to unite and expose all media-related personalities under one umbrella. If you are an artist, or maybe you're looking for one, look no further. Log on to www.relaksmedia.com, RELAKS media.com. In return, you get a free webpage and exposure to wider fan appreciation and contacts. Also, optional personal manager. Don't delay.
Relax Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Wednesday Witterer with George Shaft. My name is George Shaft, and clearly that was something that was established by the fact that the show's name is called the Wednesday Witterer with George Shaft. But joining me in the studio today is something that I don't normally put in for these shows because radio, but I have a picture. Now, I have a picture of something that makes for some pretty uncomfortable reading for a British man like myself. It is a picture of what the age of consent in various different countries is. For some countries, the age of consent is higher than Britain. Tunisia, for example, has an age of consent of 20 years old. In Britain, the age is, between 16 and 18, depending on the exact sort of, the circumstances, the specific sort of criteria. But in some countries, it gets much lower than that still. But even though for some countries there's an uncomfortably low number attached to it, I won't sort of get into that because, radio and decency. But they also have a little add-on addition that mentions that, there might be a lower age of consent, but that's sidestepped by the fact that you can't actually have any relations with anyone unless you are married. And so, well, clearly you're not going to marry children with each other, so you're not going to run into that problem, really. So who cares, right? It's a who cares maybe from their point of view, but it is definitely something that has to be sort of aired, if you will, something that's definitely something to consider. In Britain, we have an age of consent of 16, and that's like the number we decided. But ultimately, that is a number that is culturally decided. That is a line in the sand that we drew, or Parliament drew, at a specific point in time, at a specific stage of civilizational history, and then later, maybe we decide to put that line higher or lower. And that's kind of that. And the reality is for many countries, most of the world, in fact, they put that line somewhere else. They put it in a great many places lower. Brazil, for example, has that age be 14, which is a bit of a yikes, in my humble opinion. Some other countries, it's even lower than that still. But that is still a relevant part of this discussion about crime. The fact of the matter is that what we consider to be a crime and what is not a crime will differ from country to country. Remember when I was talking about adultery? How the Code of Hammurabi and how the ancient Romans both considered, in their various forms, adultery, which is the act of having relations with someone who isn't your marital partner, was a death penalty offense. Well, even though that is no longer a death penalty offense in Britain, we've not had adultery be considered a death penalty offense or even offense at all for quite a while. The fact is, though, that in some countries it still is. For example, I have a page up called billionbibles.org, which is on Sharia law. And in Sharia law, adultery is still a punishable offense. And even though this religious law, according to the website, quote, Sharia law is cast from the words of Muhammad called hadiths, his actions, which are called the Sunnah, and the Quran, which he dictated. Sharia law itself cannot be altered, but its interpretation can be. It is sort of the if you will, the official religious law of Islam. And it is the law of the land in several dozen countries. Saudi Arabia, for example, actually has Saudi Arabia, for example, has got, if you will, basically just the Sharia law. Like, they don't really have that kind of idea. It's like, no, Sharia law, the religious law, is what we want, and that's like the way we're going to do things, and that's that. Yet, no, that's not exactly the way that even other Muslim countries do. You know, for example, looking at the website, for example, Egypt is said to have quote 74% of the of it, if I understand correctly. Well, they have sort of like parts of it. Other countries decide that Sharia law, it still applies, but it only applies, in like certain specific scenarios, and we're going to put in extra laws, for other things, or we're going to write in new laws that say, yeah, actually that one part of Sharia law, even though it's the religious thing written down by God in our religion, says we're going to say actually no, that doesn't apply anymore. So we've decided to define, to go like the definition of that certain word in that certain part is different now. But the bottom line still stands. Now, the idea of what is a crime and what is an offense will change from country to country, and the punishments that go with it, the acts that can be considered even as part of a limit for that, will change. In China, for example, you have the death penalty for drink driving, and the definition for what a drink driver though is pretty low. In other countries, though, drunk driving, you can have double, triple the amount. I've forgotten what the exact number is for China. I'm kind of annoyed. I didn't put up a source before the show for this particular one. But yeah, we don't have the death penalty for drink driving in Britain, though we do actually have prison time for it. Fact of the matter is, it's yet another example that shows that what we consider to be a crime and what isn't a crime is something that constantly changes and constantly evolves over time, and also changes from place to place. I think last week was a very, very revealing one for that. In the United States, a bunch of different states had referendums, if you will, on whether or not to legalize smoking cannabis. Various states, including Montana and Arizona and South Dakota, if I remember correctly, all decided in their referendums, yeah, you know what? Smoking cannabis is a legal thing. We will not punish people for smoking the stuff. It's all good. It's A-okay. It's all legal. In Oregon, they even went even further and went that in certain specific scenarios, cocaine is legal. We're going to allow it. Yet, if they'd done that, if you were doing crack in Oregon before that referendum, you were completely doing an illegal act. You'd go to prison, in federal prison no less, for possessing harmful substances or selling harmful substances, which itself, though, is a law that is relatively recent in the sort of consciousness of humanity. Hammurabi's Code has nothing on dangerous substances. Neither did, Sharia law. Neither does except for alcohol for Sharia, but neither does the Romans. Jewish law doesn't really say anything about dangerous substances, except like, oh yeah, there's certain foods we don't eat because we believe that it's against our religion to eat it. But there we have it. The definitions. So let's recap what we had learned for crime today. Crime is at the same time a very, very intuitive idea, a very old idea, yet also an extremely difficult one to pin down, with many definitions and many interpretations both across history and across cultures. We found that in Britain, we have an assumption that we classify crimes into two kind of broad categories. One of them being common law crimes, which are the kind of like, well, duh, obviously they're a crime category, and statutory crimes, which are crimes that are created by an act of parliament, going, hey, yeah, so we had a look at, like, you know, the history, and we decided that this particular act should actually be considered a crime after all. Sorry, judges, you were wrong this whole time. We also learned that the penalties, the punishments that we dole out for crimes will vary depending on the time and the place in which they have been committed. In fact, actually, one thing I wish I'd gotten the time to get into but didn't was the idea that after a certain amount of time, you can't even be prosecuted for crimes in many places. In Britain, for example, for most crimes, there is no statutory limit. I've forgotten the exact term. You know, for say murder. You know, if you commit a murder in Britain, you are always liable for it. But in France, if somebody commits a murder and nobody finds out who did it in, I think it's 50 years, then you can't be prosecuted for that murder anymore. But it's very interesting. I've only scratched the surface in my hour-long deep dive on this vast, expansive subject on the idea of what is crime, how do we define it, and how does it change. But I do hope that you've learned something today, because I know I learned a lot while doing the research for this show. But speaking of the show, you have been listening to the Wednesday Witterer of Jorge Shaft, hosted by me, Jorge Shaft, and the time is 6 o'clock. And have a great day. I'll catch you all again very, very soon. And by very, very soon, I mean, of course, next week. See ya.
My guest today, Mark Salmon, the Art and Spirituality Show. I'm Dominic Anglim, and my special guest today is Mark Salmon, a Welsh poet.